Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 2 of Gender and Sexualities. I am going to talk about this week what you have due for the class and also for peer mentor session. And I'd also like to thank all of you for spending your time and effort posting your discussion of peer mentor session last week. It meant a lot to me that you were willing to share and be vulnerable with me and your fellow students in the class. That's very meaningful, so thank you. But let's dive into what's going on this week. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so for week 2, it's always good to start out every week by clicking on everything to see what you have going on, how long your readings are going to be for the week. And I like to start out with the slides here that your professor has put up. And I like these a lot because this is basically like your version of a PowerPoint if you were in person. And so it's giving you basically an overview of what you're learning in terms of the themes for the week. And the themes for week 2 have to do with Black feminist theory. And so you get to learn from the voices of prominent Black feminists like Audre Lorde and Kimberly Crenshaw. And Shauna, your professor, has also added some notes on Black feminism. And this is nice because this gives you additional information and resources to use to learn about Black feminism. So there's a YouTube video and some websites to learn from, and some quotes and definitions, which is really helpful. And I highly recommend going through both the PDF slides and these notes with a notebook and taking notes while you're reading them, especially on anything that you find really interesting or something that sticks out to you, something that is prominent. And you will have three required readings for this week. 2 of them are PDFs. It's always good, even if you're not ready to read them yet, just to click on them to see how long they are and how much time you're going to have to set aside in order to get your work done by the due date. Because everybody reads at different rates and everybody manages their time differently. So there's also this one here that is a website. Unfortunately, it's refusing to connect in this window. However, if you click on this little box up here, it will actually take you directly to the website. And so it takes you to this website about Kimberly Crenshaw and discussing intersectionality. Let's go back. And so your assignments that are due for the week for the class itself is your positionality paper that is due on Monday, April 10th at 11:59. And then, as always, for each week, after you do your readings, you will want to, by Wednesday at 11:59, post a question that you had from the readings. And again, it should be a thoughtful question, like a how or a why, or what do you think about this, rather than a yes or no question. So something that you're going to glean more information from. And then by Friday at 11:59, you should respond to at least one of your peers in the class on that same discussion. One thing, the peer mentor thing is not posted yet. I'm not quite done publishing it, but it's going to be very similar to last week, what you did for week 1. So you'll watch this video, and today I'm just going to talk about note taking while reading. And then you will post to the discussion board one of the notes that you took from your readings based off of what I talked about in this video. So yeah, I want to discuss note taking while reading. It's something that I feel like students don't really get a class or a lesson about. At least I know I didn't. And so you kind of get thrown into college and are expected to take these amazing notes while reading and know like exactly what to highlight. And but that's not reality. I didn't until graduate school really have a great way of taking notes while reading. But as I've practiced, I've really gotten better at my understanding, my reading comprehension of the material. And a lot of what you're reading in college is a lot harder and to understand with some deeper concepts, especially like in classes in the humanities where you're learning a lot of theory, um, like how we're learning about one this week, Black feminist theory. And sometimes it can be really complicated. But anyway, let's jump into one of your readings for the week. And so I can kind of go over how I would go about taking notes for this. So this is the Audre Lorde reading, Age, Race, Class, and Sex, Women Redefining Difference. So, I mean, even before I get started, I like to see how long it is to figure out how much time it's going to take for me to get through it. I'm a pretty slow reader, so I like to put a lot of time um, ahead so that I can get it done. I also like to check out what the date it was published because that gives you a lot of information on like the history and the ideas that were really popular at the time. So this was back in 1984, and ideas of feminism back in 1984 are going to be very different than today because we've learned a lot since then as a society, and our norms and understanding of feminism, gender, sexuality, race, all those things are going to be a lot different. There's a lot that's happened since then. Um, but anyway, I kind of want to like go over one of the passages here that I thought was interesting and kind of what notes I would take just upon reading this passage. And also, I want to, as a side note, I prefer to print out my readings because it's easier when I can highlight and write on a piece of paper. I just prefer that physical contact because writing physically with a pen actually develops more neural connections of memory in your mind. And so you get a better memory from your reading and a deeper level of comprehension when you're physically writing pen to paper rather than just typing. So highly recommend printing everything out. But I'm going to start with this passage right here where it says, refusing to recognize difference makes it impossible to see the different problems and pitfalls facing us as women. Thus, in a patriarchal power system where white skin privilege is a major prop, the entrapments used to neutralize Black women and white women are not the same. For example, it is easy for Black women to be used by the power structure against Black men, not because they are men, but because they are Black. Therefore, for Black women, it is necessary at all times to separate the needs of the oppressor from our own legitimate conflicts within our communities. This same problem does not exist for white women. Black women and men have shared racist oppression and still share it, although in different ways. Out of that shared oppression, we have developed joint defenses and joint vulnerabilities to each other that are not duplicated in the white community, with the exception of the relationship between Jewish women and Jewish men. So this passage that I just read has a lot going on in it. There's not just like one idea that you're going to glean from this whole passage, but I do want to say when you're doing a first reading, you may not understand all the concepts all at once in the reading, and that's okay. That's why kind of going over a reading multiple times is a lot better. But what I find, what I would do is like if there was a sentence in there that really clicked for me, where I was like, oh, I really understood what that said, then that is like where I would start, and that's where I would highlight. Another place too that's good to start is kind of like making sure that you understand the words in the passage. There's actually a lot of words throughout here that you might not understand, and I mean throughout this entire paper. Whether I noted a few where it's like heterosexism, if you don't know what that is, and then or I don't know, but there might be like a bunch of words. So it's good to also like underline or highlight words that you're not familiar with and look them up. And maybe even write in the margins like the definitions of those words that you're not sure about. And also you might notice how Audre Lorde writes. She chooses very carefully about her capitalization of certain words. So you'll notice throughout this paper that she chooses to capitalize words like color and black. However, she chooses not to capitalize words like white and even America. And so even something like that might stand out to you and be like, okay, why would Audre Lorde choose not to capitalize America? It's a country and it's a proper noun. And usually it's capitalized. And what does capitalization mean? It means usually, that is proper noun, but proper nouns deserve a certain respect. So by choosing not to capitalize it, is she questioning the respect one should have for their country by choosing not to capitalize its name? So these are like little things you can write in the margins as you're reading that you notice. And you just really want to pick out the things that draw your attention and interest you. And I mean, maybe this whole paper does not interest you, but as you're reading it, you can at least pick out things where you get a little light bulb that goes off and you're like, okay, I get that statement. And it's okay if you don't get the whole thing. You're not gonna get the whole thing in the first pass of reading. So now that I've talked about all that, when I read this paragraph, I mean, like I said, there are a lot of messages in this paragraph, but the biggest takeaway for me when I read this passage was it seems to be comparing identities to each other based on what kind of oppression these identities experience. So it talks about Black women and Black men sharing certain types of oppression based on their identities, but also oppression that they both don't equally share because of their gender identities and how they're seen and treated in society. So even though Black women and Black men may share race, that doesn't mean that they're treated the same in society simply because they don't share their gender. And then it also talks about white women and Black women. It compares what kind of oppression one may experience as a Black woman versus a white woman, and how it wouldn't be the same. So that's the big takeaway I got from this paragraph. It's telling me the importance in understanding that identities really influence how someone experiences privilege and oppression. And if you have multiple identities that are typically underprivileged, so if you're Black, if you're a woman, if you're trans, if you're disabled, those identities that have been historically oppressed and marginalized, when you have multiple of those identities that add up, you're going to experience a very different type of privilege and type of oppression than someone who does not have all those identities. So that is like the major thing that I got from this. And you may have gotten something else from this that you noticed. And so what I would write in the margins, I would literally write in like my own words, the purpose of the paragraph or the message that I took away from this paragraph. And mine would be like talking about comparing identities, and understanding the importance of identity and privilege. So that's just an example of a note I might write. And again, there's no right answer, right note to put when you're reading. But also when you're doing this, when you're trying to paraphrase what you're reading, like what the themes are of the paper, what the point is of a paragraph, what you're doing is you're basically doing the work for yourself when you're writing that, because what you're going to have to do for the class is write papers about what you're learning. And so you've already done the thinking part. You've already done the hard work of like trying to understand and paraphrase. And then when you go to writing your paper, you have your notes and your margins, and they're going to really help you and make writing a lot faster because you've already done that thinking part. Um, I've just noticed the more notes I take when I'm reading, the easier writing is for me later because I've already done the paraphrasing work for myself that you have to do in academic papers. Um, and then when you're finished with reading the whole thing, I like to write like at the top of the first page of the paper, like what were the themes of this paper? What was the one takeaway message that the author wants me to know? So like what was the major point and argument of this paper, which is essentially the thesis. But those are the things you want to write as you're reading. You want to highlight phrases or sentences that are really compelling to you. You want to paraphrase them in the margins. You want to um, note words that you're unfamiliar with. You want to write their definitions down. You want to ask questions. You can ask questions in the margins, like, what does this mean? Or something to that effect. Or you could even write like what you think. You might like put a bunch of exclamation points next to something that you really agree with. I do that a lot where I'm like, oh, that really caught my attention. So those are other things that you could mark as you're going through the paper. So now that we've gone over how to take notes while reading, this isn't like an extensive lesson, but it's at least a beginning, an intro to it. I want you now to take your time while doing your readings, like take your notes as you're doing them this week. And then what you'll do for your peer mentor participation points is go to the discussion for week 2 and just make a post with one of your notes that you took for your readings. And it doesn't have to be anything like super brilliant. It could be a question you had or a definition you found. Like you're all, oh, I don't know what tokenism is, but I found what it was after reading this paper. Yeah, like share anything that of the notes you took this week. And that's all you got to do for your participation points. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I know it's long, but I hope you have a great week. Thanks.